Hello and welcome back to In Progress, the only news radio show. I don't know what I used to say. Whatever I used to say, that's what it is. So I haven't done this in a while, as you can probably tell. And frankly, I have to thank Kim Iversen. I am extremely, extremely grateful for her because she produced a take so absolutely mind-boggling, to borrow a word, as you'll see, that I had to quite literally re-download OBS, re-download Adobe Premiere in order to produce a takedown of it. It was such a take that I could not let it stand without commenting on it. And it's such a take, by the way, because I don't actually comment on takes. I don't think I've really ever done that. I'm not a reaction. I'm not a Twitch streamer because I know what I'm talking about. So uh, I saw something so absolutely shocking that I had to respond, which is why I am now going to present to you, the people, Kim Iversen's take on the GOP being the real party of the working class. Okay, let's watch this very large-brained exercise in politics.
Kim, what's on your radar?
Well, yesterday, a couple of headlines caught my eye. In USA Today, a headline read, Republican-backed bill would federally decriminalize marijuana. And Daniel Moran's of HuffPost tweeted, Republican from New York's Southern Tier running against Rep. John Katko supports a public health insurance option. Now, these headlines, along with our interview with Republican candidate for New York Mayor Curtis Sliwa, who supported universal basic income, confirms what many of us have long suspected, that the voting bases of the Democratic and Republican parties are, in fact, flipping. And
So, first, she says the Republican parties and the Democratic Party's base is flipping. And by the way, she says that so it's kind of a circular argument, which is a bit weird. Uh, I mean, it's not really circular, but just like I'm not really a logic nerd, but she's using proof of the conclusion to prove the conclusion, right? She says that the flip in the party base is creating changes in the working class, is creating changes in policy that favor the working class. But she's citing the changes in policy that benefit the working class in order to defend that the working class base is flipping. So that's not really logical, but put that aside. Not everyone is as logically intellectual as I. However, I'm not really asking for logical consistency. I understand that many arguments aren't logically consistent, but I'm a bit skeptical of this entire thing. So hopefully she can convince me that she's completely correct and that, she's just seeing something that no one else is seeing. Okay, let's see.
The flip within the Republican Party is causing the party itself to adopt new policies. Now, let's start off with Republicans wanting to decriminalize weed. On Monday, Representative Nancy Mace of...
So I should note that I kind of jumped the gun there, but she was going to say it anyway, that the flip is causing a change in policy. But she's using the change in policy to justify that a flip is happening. That's circular. Okay.
South Carolina introduced legislation to decriminalize marijuana and hand power back to the states. This wouldn't make weed legal nationwide. It would just allow the states to decide on their own without federal restrictions.
So the weird thing about that is that this is like an affirmative action for the Republican Party, right? The Republican Party can just introduce a bill, and now they're the party of the working class. But the Democratic Party introduces a bill in December 2020. They introduced a bill, and they believe they passed it in the House. They introduced another bill in the Senate in June of 2021, right? So they do both of those things, but that means that they're lying to their base. So which one is it, right? Because you can't claim both. And then also, let's put aside that. Representative Nancy Mace, who is, I think, she's not anti-Trump. She's like a Nikki Haley almost. She voted to hold Steve Bannon in contempt of Congress. She opposed removing Liz Cheney at the beginning. She, let's see what else she did. She is a supporter of both religious liberty and gay marriage. I strongly support LGBTQ rights. She did not sign on to an amicus brief to overturn Roe. To me, yeah, she began to disavow Trump in the wake of the U.S. Capitol riots, the insurrection, right? So Nancy Mace is absolutely not a populist Republican. She's a Nikki Haley. She opposes Trump, or opposed, and kind of probably still does. So she's not a populist in any real sense. And if people pointed to her as a populist, you'd probably laugh at them. She's a Nikki Haley. She's not she's not this massive Josh Hawley even, who is obviously a liar and a grifter of the highest order, but she's not that. So let's continue.
For a Republican to introduce this with a half a dozen other GOP reps co-sponsoring
That's not a lot of co-sponsors, by the way.
the legislation is mind-boggling. This just seems like something Democrats would be pursuing.
They are. They literally are, because Democrats passed a decriminalization bill in the House for weed. Because Democrats have been at the forefront of legalizing weed in basically every state weed was legalized in. So, okay, sure.
There's also, as I mentioned, growing.
Wait, actually, hold on. I don't know if I mentioned this. This is 1 minute, 9 seconds. Let's move back to the beginning here. Look at this. The measure, which May said she hoped would garner broad GOP support, was met immediately with criticism from conservatives in her home state. Some of whom vowed opposition to any effort toward legalization, and this isn't even legalization. Okay, moving back to 109.
Pursuing. There's also, as I mentioned, growing support within the Republican Party for universal basic income. Championed by Andrew Yang, who ran as a Democrat, the idea that people should have a basic amount of money to live off of is now being adopted by members of the GOP.
That's just not true. But you know what? Okay, let's just take your point that the Democratic policy conversation, for some reason, influences the Republicans. Let's assume that that's true. I'll grant that to you. Why are we pointing to Senator Mitt Romney as the populist Republican? I've heard that Obama acted too much like Romney by being too far to the right, which is not true, but let's assume that that is true. And I think that this populist conundrum isn't even trying to be remotely logically consistent. Nothing about this makes sense. This does not pass the sniff test. It doesn't pass the laugh test. Frankly, it doesn't pass any test.
During the height of the lockdowns, it was Republican Senator Mitt Romney who proposed giving every American the $1,000 a month. Curtis Sliwa, the recent Republican candidate for New York City mayor, had universal basic income on his platform. I mean, think about that. The Republican in New York City, of all places, was the one with UBI on his platform. Also,
why should that be shocking? Curtis Sliwa, who, by the way, lost, ran on UBI. Okay. And Curtis Sliwa, he ran in a liberal city. So, of course, he adopts some liberal policies because no one's voting for a Reagan Republican in New York. That's why he chose UBI, not because the Republican Party is becoming a populist organization. You can't take one person in New York City and expand that to the entire country when New York City is one of the most far-left cities in the country. They elected AOC. That does not mean the Democratic Party is a party of AOC. The Republican Party is not and will never be, in my view, the party of Curtis Sliwa.
Dan Larson, a Republican challenger to Montana Senator Steve Daines, also adopted the policy.
So I've actually never heard of Dan Larson, and I'm pretty sure I've watched this before. So let me take a quick look. So if you look up Dan Larson, even if you look up Dan Larson politician, he doesn't come up, so that's already worrying. So let's look up Steve Daines. Let's turn on the research tab. Let's look up Steve Daines. And U.S. Senate election in Montana, Republican primary, eliminated in primary, and Dan Larson isn't even number 2. He's number 3. He got 5.6% of the vote. He got less than John Driscoll, who I've also never heard of. So he's beaten by 83 points, and he's the future of the Republican Party. I guess Vermin Supreme is the future of the Democratic Party.
The pandemic not only brought the idea of universal basic income to the forefront for some Republicans, but Republicans took the side of small business owners and workers by choosing not to lock down their states for an extended period of time. The lockdowns resulted in hundreds of thousands of businesses closing down for good and workers being laid off. Before mega corporations started creeping into the landscape, small business owners made up the backbone of the U.S. economy and fortified a robust middle class. They have been...
So let me just look up small business owner. We're just going to look that up. Because I'm pretty sure small business employees went up over the past 2 or 3 years. There are more small business employees now, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there are more small business employees now, or at least more small businesses now, than there were in 2019. Okay, so maybe the lockdowns did destroy small businesses, but not to that big of an extent.
Dwindling and dwindling and dwindling.
By the way, hundreds of thousands of small businesses. There are, I think, 31 million small businesses in the U.S. So they account for 64% of new jobs, according to Oberlo, which doesn't seem to be real. I don't know what it is. But regardless, that just seems to be fear mongering to me. I don't think lockdowns and vaccines ended the small business owner.
And the pandemic lockdowns didn't help. Not to mention, Democrats have
I'm sure they didn't help, but they also didn't help big business.
taken on a distinctive tone against small business owners and landlords, conflating them with those mega corporations.
So I don't think Democrats, I don't think all Democrats or even most Democrats did that. So maybe you're looking for moderate Democrats. Maybe you want to vote for a moderate Democrat who supports decriminalizing weed, UBI, and not UBI, but like $1,000 a month, like Romney, because Bernie was going for $2,000 a month. So maybe you support moderate Democrats and you just don't know it. That's weird. Maybe you support moderate Democrats if Biden was anti-vax.
Mom and pop shops and second homeowners are hardly the same as giant corporations. Many are part of the service industry. They lack a college education and are viewed as part of the blue collar working middle class. So this
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if landlords are being villainized by the Democratic Party writ large, but even then, I don't know if they're working class in the same way that we're talking about the working class, because they normally voted Republican. Small business owners have historically voted Republican. So I don't know how this even points to a voting base flip. If they voted for Bush and they voted for McCain and they voted for Romney, I don't know if that's a flip.
vilifying of anyone who owns anything at all has driven many voters away from the Democratic Party and to the GOP.
So vilifying anyone who owns anything at all, but the working class is losing its owning its property, right? Because of BlackRock and et cetera. I don't know. Like populism has created such an environment that I do not know what they're talking about half the time because they don't live in the same reality. But okay, but the working class supposedly has nothing to own, so I don't know what they're talking about. Again,
Also, during the pandemic, Republicans have been mostly the ones advocating for bodily medical autonomy, oddly enough. Now, this
I'm going to skip the vaccine thing, so I don't care. Oh wait, hold on. Public option. Um, I don't know if I even have to address that. The Republicans don't support the public option. I'm sure Andrew McCarthy, one of a thousand Republican candidates, supports public option, but generally they oppose the Affordable Care Act. So I don't think they support the public option. Maybe if they didn't like 2 years ago try to reform the Affordable Care Act by abolishing it, maybe I'd agree with them. But you know, they're lying, obviously. And actually, they're not lying because they don't believe it, and they don't say that they do. So, okay.
Or he goes on to say, I support a public health care option for those who cannot afford private insurance. It doesn't stop with medical care. Many of his policies echo the sentiments of the working class progressives and illuminate.
So she's talking about one candidate, Andrew McCarthy, who's running in New York. So maybe you don't take someone running in New York and expand that to the entire country. She's, I think, at this point, Curtis Sliwa, this Andrew McCarthy, she's taken people from New York who are Republicans, who happen to be Republicans, and are expanding them to the entire country. Maybe you should just talk about New York Republicans because you're not talking about anyone else. Oh, sorry, I forgot about the Montana guy who lost by 80 points. Okay, maybe you should talk about him as well.
Exactly why so many Bernie Sanders supporters switched and voted for Trump. Andrew,
I always thought that the point was that Sanders supporters didn't switch and vote for Trump. At least it's what populists said. Skipping half of her thing because I don't care. Let's see, what's the future of the GOP according to her?
He would have remained in office even despite his terrible demeanor. But Andrew,
Okay, so Trump, I think she's talking about, who lied, obviously, was an obvious con man, obvious grifter, and is still doing it. So, I mean, I'm just going to skip the rest for radar because I don't care. And there's something else I want to get to. Oh, Liz Cheney's bad, I guess. And that shows that the Republican Party is changing. Okay, let's see this.
They're still old guard. But what I find the most interesting about the Republican Party's shift is, as I mentioned with the Democrats, we also saw the same shift happening with Bernie Sanders, the rise of the squad. And the Democratic Party establishment seemed to double down against them in a lot of ways. Whereas on the Republican side, they're not as, if they are doing it, it doesn't seem as blatant. They're instead actually going with it. I mean, just like what.
So I think she means that they're taking out Liz Cheney, who went against Trump. And Trump was, as I think she mentioned, a grifter and a con man. Or no, she didn't mention that. I mentioned that he's a grifter and a con man. But he is a grifter and a con man. There's no other way to put it. So I think she put it in more favorable terms that he didn't fulfill any of his promises. But if Obama did that, or if Biden did that, they would be neoliberal, hellmonger Democrats who want to destroy the working class. But Trump did that, and I guess he's just happens to be someone who doesn't know what he's doing. This is a really bad screenshot, by the way. But it doesn't matter. It's YouTube, so I can pause wherever I want. Okay.
What they've done to Liz Cheney, they're like, okay, your time's up, you're out. I mean, we're moving on to a new era of Republican Party. So
Yeah, like Elise Stefanik, who is definitely a MAGA person. Seriously.
this is very interesting, and it's interesting how they're actually adopting the policies that the working class want as well. They're not just giving lip service.
Okay.
I mean, we'll see, right? They still have to pay.
I mean, we'll see.
Yeah. Are you sure they're not just giving lip service? We don't know. Right. We don't quite know that it's not just lip service. It could be lip service, and then they govern, as you would have expected Republicans to govern.
I'll tell you why I don't think it's.
So Robbie, who is the right-wing guy here, he's a libertarian, writes for reason, is absolutely completely right. I forget how Kim responds, so I have to watch that before I respond.
Lip service.
Before I butt into this three-person conversation.
That's why I think it's different. They're actually electing these people.
But they aren't. They lost by 80 points. They lost by 80 points at the beginning. Curtis Sliwa lost to Eric Adams by a lot. Andrew McCarthy hasn't even ran in the campaign. Like he's running, but he hasn't even gotten any votes. So no, they're not getting elected. I mean, they're electing Marjorie Taylor Greene, but if you ask Marjorie Taylor Greene whether she supports the public option, okay, I would love to hear her answer if she even knows what it is. So I didn't see any other reason to do this, to watch this any further, because it was mind-bogglingly crazy. My brain melted as I viewed the yammering about the public option or whatever she's talking about, the GOP supporting the public option. I mean, it's silly, right? It's affirmative action for Republicans. Republicans can do whatever they want, and they'll be working class, whatever. But Democrats can, also fight for the public option, but in a real way, and they turn out to be neoliberal fascists. So it's a bit silly. I don't really care about what populists have to say, except for the fact that populism is silly and fun to watch. If you really want an actual takedown of the argument, there are a few. I know Nathan Robinson wrote something good about right populism being fascism, which is true, by the way. And read about right populism in history, and you'll see that it's kind of true. And then also, you should watch the actual video, because I think Ryan Grimm does a better takedown than I ever could of what she says by just asking her questions. He asks her questions and she doesn't really answer them, and is unable to respond in basically every conversation that they have. But the great commenters, the great rising comment section, loves Kim Iversen, so they can't even understand that she doesn't know what she's talking about. So I'm planning on making Populist Watch something that happens often. I don't know if I even mentioned that this is called Populist Watch, but I'm planning on making Populist Watch something that happens like Grifter of the Week every week, or every week that I do a show. So tell me if you like this. Tell me if you didn't. If you're a populist and you want to debate me about that, you can do it in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, because dislikes don't matter anymore, so I don't care if you dislike it. But make sure to watch more In Progress with Raymond Perez, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.